All right, so it's COMP213, and we're back. It's week 10, lesson 10, part 2, and we just finished kind of doing a responsive nav bar, so to speak. And what we do is it actually collapses. It's a collapsible nav bar. That's the styling we went with. And again, if I was to look at what it looks like, I've put it up on GitHub for those people who are watching. What it looks like, again, is kind of crunches in, and it crunches out. And there's a bit of space on the right-hand side here for our nav bar. That's the style that we use so far. Right, we may decide to change that later on. We may decide to balance it off on the left. There's many different things we're going to do, but for now we're going to use this as our boilerplate to start projects from now on. When we get together, this is our boilerplate. We're going to have a little bit of a nav bar. We don't have to do this again and again and over again. I want you to start with something that we made in class, all right? So is it awesome? Is it amazing? Is it the best boilerplate ever? Absolutely not, right? But it's something for us to start with, and you don't have to keep typing the same stuff over and over again. Okay. So how do we do that? How do we make a template now? So I'm going to do two things. Now that I'm stopped debugging, I'm going to close down these little files, right? And I've got my boilerplate open. I'm going to go File. Do this with me now if you want to do this. If you want to create the boilerplate, File, Export Template, right? And it's going to pull up this little dialog box, right? So now this is, you can use this for any one of your projects. Let's say, for example, you're making a project and you want the project to look and feel exactly the same. You don't want to do this nav bar stuff over and over again, and you want to do multiple pages, you know, as an example, with this fashion. So I'm going to create my own project template. I'm going to call this COMP213 boilerplate. That's what it's called, and I'm going to click Next. And you can give a description, like for example, responsive boilerplate for use in class projects, right? I could supply an icon if I wanted to give it a special icon, right, for Visual Studio. I don't want to do anything else. I just want to press Finish. When I do that, it gives me a couple other things I've kind of created, right? Some other templates. And now what I can do is I can File, Close Solution. And every time we start our solution now, we're not going to do that File, New Project anymore the same way. We're going to go like this. File, New, and we're going to go Project. But in this, instead of going to Web, ASP.NET Web Application, which makes no sense, didn't make sense for us, we're going to go to C#, the top level, C#, and we're going to scroll all the way down until we see our little application, COMP213 boilerplate. Yeah? So now, we don't want to name it boilerplate. We want to name this lesson 10, right? So we're going to go COMP213. We're going to rename this thing to lesson 10. And we're going to say part 1, right? And I'm going to create a new GitHub project for you guys so I can put it up on GitHub. Press OK. And now my lesson is called COMP213 lesson 10 part 1, right? Well, guess what I have inside? I have my index.html with all my content, right? It looks like my web application name is COMP213 boilerplate. I'm going to change the name here to lesson 10 part 1. So I have a little bit of comments here on the top. My July 14th still holds. That's what my date is. Everything else is the same. I do want to change my title to COMP213 lesson 10 part 1. Oops. Right, so that my title is the same, right? And now what I want to do, now that I've got this, for those people watching at home, for you guys to watch, I'm going to go back into my repos here on GitHub and create a new repository. And I'm going to call this COMP213 lesson 10 part 1. And click Create Repository. Now I have this GitHub link. Let's see if I can make this go without it crashing like it did last time. I love it. I want to go to Home. I want to go to Changes. I've got all this stuff that I'm adding in there. And if you notice, it's pointing to COMP213 lesson 10 part 1. I'm going to say, you know, created base Visual Studio HTML5 boilerplate project, right? Commit. I'll go home, and I'm going to say unsync commits. And now I need this little URL that I'm going to get from here, from GitHub. And again, you don't have to follow this, but I'm just showing you how it's done. So if you've seen it one time, you know what GitHub is, and click Publish. When I do that, if everything goes well, now in my GitHub, I've got my application. You can follow along for lesson 10, part 1. Okay. So this part, I want to start talking about forms. But before we get there, and I got some basic styling and stuff. I want to finish off this CSS3 media stuff. So we talked about media queries. We talked about flexible images, and one of the things to do is make it a height of auto and a max width of 100% for images. That's one thing. And also there's some, from testing mobile, we have to finish up from a testing perspective. When we test mobile devices, we want to emulate them. There's different emulators we can use. Obviously it's best to use something to do with like an actual phone would work best if you want to emulate it on a phone. And if you want to debug our application, there's something we can use, this jigsaw.w3org CSS validator, which actually checks to see if our CSS is working fine. So that's really it in a nutshell for chapter 8. When we start off chapter 9, or sorry, chapter 10 for forms, let's take a look at this thing. We start off, what we want to talk about for the remainder of this week is a couple things. How do we create forms, right? What does it look like in terms of what they do? There's two pieces to the form. There's the web page form itself, and then there's the server-side processing. Now we can't take care of server-side processing in this course. Just like you're going to create your assignment 4, your form it's not necessary for your form to actually work. Now if you can make your form work and all that kind of stuff, that's great. If you know how to use PHP and all that stuff for your assignment 4, that's a great bonus. But for me, the only thing I care about is you create your front end. How do you create your front end form? So a couple of things to note with forms. One is the form tag itself. The form tag is, you require it to kind of set up a form. It gives a layout of a form on the outside. It's almost like the container, the form container. So the thing that contains the form is the form tag itself. It's almost like having a nav element or a div tag or something. It's that top level container, right? So form. Your input tag itself, when you have input elements, it configures all kinds of text boxes, radio buttons, check boxes, all kinds of stuff. It really depends on the type of input that you're looking for. So there's buttons, there's depending on the type. If you go type equals to, and you can decide what kind of type it is. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit. Text areas, right? Again, text areas are a larger text box you can enter some information into, right? That's what a text area is. A select tag gives me a drop-down list, right? So you can do a drop-down list with a select tag. And then options, right, creates almost like this idea of a selection box or a checkbox. All right, that's what they do. All right, so let's take a look. Here's an example of form. You have an email with an input type of text, so you're listening for a text. Your name is email, and the ID is email. There are some brand new selector types for HTML5 that we're going to also kind of explore. Let's take a look at that. So first and foremost, when we want to add a form, we're going to get rid of this p tag. Remember, this whenever we use our boilerplate, our template, if you will, we can remove stuff so that way we can test other content out. So I'm going to get rid of my p tag altogether. I'm going to keep my heading, and I'm going to call this my content heading. I'm going to say forms, forms example. Okay, so we're going to add a form underneath my heading. Right, inside my form, right, this is where we're going to have our, we're going to actually give it an ID, right, of main form. You can call it whatever you like. Right, inside my form, we want some elements. Like for example, if I want to enter in a name, username and password, kind of. If I was going to make a username and password type form, right? So username then would be the form element, right? And now I want some kind of input. So here's my input. Okay, so here's my input. Now in my input, I want my type. And look at the different types you have: button, checkbox, color, date, datetime local, email, file, hidden, month, number, radio, search, all this kind of stuff, and text. Let's look at text. So I'm listening for text, username, right? And the other thing I want to put in is, if you notice, there's some other attributes you can put in here, right? There's tons and tons of attributes from the form itself, right? Some of the ones, if you want to know from a form perspective, now they just mentioned type and name, right? Because we can actually name the form itself. Why would I put a name or a title? Why would I bother? For screen readers, it tells us, tells the screen reader what the hell the form is saying, right? And also, we want to give an ID to the form itself. We want to target this particular input. So, for example, let's say I want to say my ID, right, is equal to username. So if I want to target username and I want to style my form from a username perspective, I can do that, right? Again, my name, if I want to keep it the same, so name is equal to username, right? That's my form. If I save this thing and I launch it, let's see what I got so far. All right, I got this username, right? That's default styling for you guys. So I got this little checkbox, this little box, and I can type in some information, and it'll keep scrolling forever, right? Okay. Let's do a couple things. For main form, we'll stop debugging for a second. In our main.css, just so we can highlight what's going on here, here's our main.css. We can target our main form at the bottom. So we'll just kind of go down here, way at the bottom, and we'll go to put in like main form, right? And we'll put a border of 1 pixel dotted or dashed, say dashed red, just so we can see the form itself, what the form container looks like. Let's take a look. And it'd be nice if I ran the thing. Let's try it again. So if you notice the form right now, it's like any container. It kind of spans this entire length. Now, if I squash this up now someone asked me, "Hey, do you want to do responsive forms?" Well, responsive forms are cool, but take a look what it does, right? I have to the form itself is like any element. I could style it in different ways. Now, it is contained. This is the good thing. I put my form inside of my main content div tag, and I've already given my main content div tag a little bit of styling. I said, give a little bit of padding and so on, and I've kind of adjusted my form. Okay, so here's my username. Let's add in a password, right? So I'm going to go password, and it's a different type of input, right? I'm going to say input, right? And this time my type, instead of text, right, type is equal to password. Let's try this out. My name is also password. And my ID is password. Why not? I'll put it all in there. Okay, username and password. And let's see what this looks like. Now, how come it didn't go here? Like underneath, you'd kind of think that my username and password would be underneath here, right? So here's my username, so Tom, and then my password. If I start typing password, it gives me my dots. That's the default styling that it gives me when it comes to username and password, right? Okay, cool. So that's very simple, right? Now, if I want to put this password down here, right, what do I do? Sorry? Well, I could put a break, right? But I want to try and do it without using, I want to use more semantic stuff. So without using a break, because break's non-semantic, even though we did it for address. I didn't want to go too much into that day. But the way we should be doing it is we should be targeting our input elements and giving them block characteristics, right? So if I go to my main CSS and I say that, you know what, any input elements, and usually I want to put, when I say any, I want to put them at the top. So I got my H1, H2, H3, all these things, right, as an example. I've got my images that I've said max width is 80%, and I should put a height of auto. There's my height of auto, right? And what I want to put in here is before my header tags, I want to talk about my input tags. And input tags should have a display of block. Let's see what that does. So if I go display block and I refresh, right, they're one on top of the other now. So username, password. There's another thing you can do. For mobile devices, we can also think of placeholder text, right? Placeholder text. How do you do that? Well, here's what placeholder text looks like. If I go back to index.html and inside my username, right, I want to say enter your username right here. I can do something like this. I can type in placeholder, right, and I can say enter your username, right? And then for password, I'm not going to have a password. So let's leave that in. Placeholder is another special HTML5 characteristic, right? If I refresh now, it's going to say enter your username, right, inside there, right? Now what am I missing from a login form perspective? The login button, right? I need that. So let's do that. So let's put input, right? And my input, my type is button, right? And now you see my value is submit. If I go one of those. And by the way, my form is missing some stuff too, right? My form action right now doesn't do anything, right? I can make it go somewhere or do something, but my form right now is going to do nothing. My form action is not going to do anything. When I submit, it's just going to relaunch my browser, right? Relaunch my form, my place. And let's see what happens now. So I'm going to refresh. I got a submit button. I click it, and it does nothing. That's how it should be, right? Because now submit, it says value submit. I don't want value being submit. I want my value being login, right? Here's my login. And I also want my ID. If I want to target this thing, I can also put an ID of login button, right? That makes sense. So I can target it with JavaScript later on, if I want to, or CSS. I want to style my button a little bit differently. I don't want to accept my default styling. I could do that, right? Right. Now again, this is accepting the default styles. I haven't really changed the styles. I haven't changed the padding. Like there's a lot of work I can do here to increase this, to make this look, to improve this, to make this look even better. Like for example, you know what? I really want some spacing between my lines. I want some padding around my objects, and so on. Right? So this is really what we've kind of put in here. See, we have got an input type submit, value is sign up, an input type reset. Reset, what it does is another button, and it resets the form. Let's try this out. So if I go to login or cancel, right, as an example, or reset, I can do that by going in here and changing my input type. I can go, again, input, and my type is reset. I don't have to put I could change my value to reset as well, so it says reset. And ID would be my reset button if I wanted to target that, reset button. And let's see what I got here. So refresh. So there's my reset. Oh man, I got my reset button way down here. Why? Because I said block for my stuff, for my inputs. So maybe when I don't want to target everything with block, I only want my inputs, my input items that are not buttons, right, to be block elements, but my other input items not to or to be inline. So how do I do that? I can do that later on. I won't do it today, but let's say if I say my name is Tom and my password is blah blah blah, and if I click login, that's cool. If I press reset, it resets the form. Right? So it has some default functionality built in without any JavaScript whatsoever that's available to any browser. Okay. Again, what it does, the form element itself, just to finish off for today, one thing to take away from today is it's like any other element, any other containing element, right? You can style it any other way. You can put a background. You can nest it inside of other elements like div tags, like we just did. And in any of the form elements, and by the way, I know some people, if you were using Expression Web today, you'd be like, oh, this is easy, right? Because you would just be dragging and dropping, right? We're making them from scratch, but this is better for us because when we drag and drop stuff, you create additional styles in the background that you don't see. Whereas this way, you're controlling the way it's going to look, how the elements are on the page, what they look like. One thing I'm going to try and do with you guys with forms over the next day or so next day, is we're going to try and style these things to make them look better, a lot better than they look today. Okay, for now, we're going to continue to work on this lesson part. So next time we get together, we'll be working with lesson 10 part 1 from GitHub. Okay, otherwise, see you next day.